I work at this gas station, night shift mostly. It's usually quiet, nothing out of the ordinary. But this one night, things got real weird. There's this guy, seemed normal at first, like any other customer. He walked in with a smile, asking for some cigarettes. Seemed friendly enough, making small talk about the weather and stuff. But then something shifted, you know? His smile felt different, like it wasn't real, like it was hiding something else. I handed him his smokes, and he paid, but he lingered by the counter, asking questions. Innocent stuff, at first. But then it got personal, asking about my shift hours and if I worked alone. That's when things started feeling off, you know? Like he was sizing me up or something. I brushed it off, tried to act normal. But he kept coming closer, invading my space. He'd lean in when he talked, like he was trying to get inside my head. And then he said something that made my skin crawl. He said, "You're all alone here, aren't you? Must be scary." I tried to laugh it off, but I was getting nervous. He started asking if I had a boyfriend, if I lived nearby. Every question felt invasive, like he was prying into my life. Then he reached over the counter, getting too close for comfort. I took a step back, but he didn't stop. I could see something in his eyes, something dark. He was trying to be charming, but it felt fake. It felt dangerous. He asked if I wanted company for the night, said he could keep me safe. That's when I knew I needed him gone. I tried to play it cool, saying I had work to do. But he wasn't having it. He insisted on staying, said he was just being friendly. But his voice, it didn't match his smile. It was like a warning, you know? I started feeling trapped, like I couldn't get away from him. I tried to signal for help, but no one was around. It was just me and him, and I was starting to panic. I tried to keep calm, but inside, I was terrified. Then he made a move to come around the counter, and that's when I knew I had to do something. I grabbed the phone, pretended to call someone. Told him my boyfriend was coming, hoping he'd back off. But he just laughed and said, "I don't see anyone." I felt sick. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew I had to get him out. I told him he had to leave, that he was making me uncomfortable. He acted surprised, like he was hurt. But his eyes, they were cold. He finally stepped back, but he didn't leave right away. He lingered by the door, looking at me with this unsettling smile. I locked the door as soon as he left, shaking like a leaf. I couldn't shake off that feeling, like I narrowly escaped something awful. I called the cops, told them what happened. They said they'd keep an eye out, but there wasn't much they could do. I spent the rest of the night on edge, checking every shadow, every noise. I still see his face when I close my eyes, that fake smile on those eyes that held something dark. I don't know what he wanted or what he was capable of, but I pray I never see him again. That night changed something in me, made me fear the friendly faces the most. It was getting late, and my fuel gauge blinked urgently at me, so I pulled into the gas station. It was one of those quiet stations along a deserted road, the kind where you're the only customer. I got out, trying to ignore the eerie feeling creeping up my spine. The place looked deserted, almost abandoned, except for one figure behind the counter. The guy at the register, there was something off about him. He was fidgety, jittery even, and his eyes darted around as if he was expecting something or someone. I tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to a long day and a tired mind. I walked up to the counter, keeping a polite distance. He glanced at me, a quick, almost anxious look, and then back at the shelves behind him. He was muttering to himself, words I couldn't quite catch. His behavior was unsettling, but I needed to refuel and get back on the road. I asked for a full tank, trying to keep my tone casual. He nodded absently, then disappeared into the back. Minutes ticked by, and I started feeling uneasy, wondering why it was taking so long. I peeked around, but the place seemed deserted, not a soul in sight. Finally, he emerged, but something was different. His demeanor had changed. Now he was fixated on me, eyes locked onto mine in a way that made my skin crawl. His movements were slow, deliberate, as he started filling the tank. I felt like he was studying me, analyzing my every move. My heart started pounding, and I fumbled for my wallet, eager to pay and leave. But then he began speaking, a low voice, almost a whisper, muttering something about how late it was and how dangerous these roads could be at this hour. The words hung in the air, chilling me. I could feel the tension rising, a growing sense of unease settling like a heavy cloak. I just wanted to leave, to get out of there, but I needed to finish up. He finished filling the tank and slowly handed me the receipt. As I reached for it, our hands brushed, and a chill ran down my spine. His touch was cold, almost clammy, and he held onto my hand a beat longer than necessary, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach churn. I muttered a quick thanks, snatched the receipt, and practically ran back to my car, heart racing. I didn't look back, but I felt his eyes on me, that intense stare burning into the back of my head. I got in, hands trembling as I started the engine, praying it wouldn't stall. I stole a glance at the store. It was like a scene from a horror movie. He was still there, watching, almost motionless, his eyes following me until I turned the corner, disappearing from view. The relief flooded in as I merged onto the road, away from that unsettling gas station. But something lingered, a sense of dread, of being watched, as if his gaze had seared into my mind, haunting me even as I drove away. The night seemed darker, the road more desolate. Every shadow, every rustle of leaves made me jump. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being followed, of that clerk's unsettling behavior replaying in my mind. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see his face, but the road behind was empty. Still, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I wasn't alone, that his eyes were still on me, watching from the shadows. I pressed harder on the gas pedal, eager to put distance between me and that gas station. But then, just ahead, I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road, barely illuminated by the dim glow of the streetlight. My heart skipped a beat. It couldn't be, I told myself, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light. But as I got closer, dread settled in my stomach. It was him, the clerk from the gas station, standing there, his eyes fixed on my car as I drove past. Panic surged, and I sped up, desperate to get away. But then, I noticed something even more chilling. He was holding something, waving it in the air. It looked like the receipt I had snatched from him moments ago. Fear clenched my chest as I drove faster, heart pounding in my ears. He was behind me, following, with that same unsettling stare burning into my back. I didn't know what he wanted, why he was following me, but I knew I had to get away, to escape that creeping terror. The road seemed endless, the night swallowing me whole. I dared not look back, but I could feel his presence, a haunting specter in the darkness. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, heart racing with each passing second. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being hunted, of being in a nightmare that I couldn't escape. I drove faster, recklessly, desperate to reach the safety of civilization. But no matter how far I drove, that unsettling feeling of being watched, of being followed, never faded. Finally, lights appeared on the horizon, signs of civilization, of safety. I pushed the car to its limits, adrenaline fueling my escape. As I approached the town, I dared to glance in the rearview mirror, praying he was gone. And to my relief, the road behind was empty. I drove straight to the nearest police station, heart still pounding, hands shaking as I recounted the nightmarish encounter. They listened intently, but their efforts to locate the gas station clerk turned up empty. I never found out why he was behaving so strangely, or why he followed me that night. It was late, and I needed to grab a few things from the gas station. The night was quiet, stars peeking through the dark sky. As I pulled up to the station, something caught my eye, an unusual figure by the air pump. It was a little girl, her face stained with tears, looking lost and scared. My heart went out to her. I parked and cautiously approached, trying not to startle her. She was visibly upset, sniffling and trembling. I asked if she was okay, but she just stared at me, wide-eyed, clutching a torn piece of cloth in her tiny hands. I didn't know what to do. She looked so fragile and alone. I asked if she was waiting for someone or if I could help her in any way. She finally whispered, almost inaudibly, that she was running away from something and needed help. My instincts kicked in, and I knew I couldn't just leave her there. I asked if she wanted to sit in my car, thinking it might make her feel safer. She hesitated but eventually nodded, holding onto that piece of cloth as if it was her lifeline. I walked her to my car, and as she climbed in, I caught a glimpse of the piece of cloth. It was part of a dress, torn and blood-stained. My heart sank, a wave of unease washing over me. I asked her where she was coming from, hoping to understand what had happened. But she remained silent, staring blankly out the window. The atmosphere felt heavy, suffocating even, as if something terrible was lurking in the silence. I started the car and drove towards the gas station attendant, hoping they could help or at least call the authorities. But as I pulled up, the station looked deserted, eerie even, with no signs of life. I felt a chill run down my spine. I glanced at the girl, trying to assess the situation, but she seemed to have withdrawn into herself. Suddenly, a movement caught my eye, a shadowy figure at the edge of the gas station, someone or something lurking in the darkness. My heart raced as I realized we weren't alone. Panic surged through me, and instinctively, I locked the car doors. I tried to calm the girl, assuring her that everything would be okay, but inside, I was gripped by fear. The figure in the shadows seemed to be approaching, slowly, deliberately. I wanted to drive away, to get us out of there, but I couldn't risk it with this child in my car. I frantically searched for my phone to call for help, but the signal was weak, barely there. I tried to start the car, but it refused to cooperate, the engine sputtering as if mocking my attempts to escape. The figure drew closer, revealing itself, a tall, looming figure, their face obscured by darkness. Fear paralyzed me as I realized that this situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. I had to protect the girl, but I was at a loss. Then, just as the figure was within a few feet of the car, I noticed something, a glint of light, a reflection off a badge. Relief flooded me as I realized it was a police officer. I hastily rolled down the window, desperate for help. The officer approached, asking questions, trying to understand the situation. But before I could explain, he motioned for me to step out of the car, his tone urgent yet cautious. As I complied, I noticed his gaze shift from me to the girl in the car. His expression changed, something unreadable flashed across his face, a mix of shock and alarm. He whispered something into his radio, words I couldn't quite catch, and then, out of nowhere, he yelled at me to step away from the car. Confusion gripped me as I tried to comprehend what was happening. But then, more police cars arrived, surrounding us, officers emerging with caution in their stance. They were focused on the girl, treating her as if she was dangerous. I was utterly bewildered. The officers led me away, asking questions, trying to piece things together. But they wouldn't give me any answers, just a solemn request to stay calm and cooperate. Hours passed, but the confusion and fear lingered. I tried to make sense of what had happened, but the authorities were tight-lipped, keeping me in the dark. Eventually, they told me to go home, but the events of that night haunted me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something sinister had happened at that gas station, something beyond my comprehension. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of the distressed girl and the eerie gas station lingered like a chilling nightmare. The authorities never revealed what they found or what had transpired that night, leaving me with an unsettling sense of dread and unanswered questions. It was a night I'd never forget, the night I stumbled upon a young girl in distress, only to uncover a series of unsettling events that would forever haunt me, a mystery that remained shrouded in darkness. I was driving back home after a long day at work, exhausted and eager to reach my cozy apartment. The gas gauge blinked ominously, reminding me that I needed to refuel. I pulled into a nearby gas station, hoping for a quick stop. As I maneuvered towards a pump, I noticed a man in a flashy car cutting sharply into the lane ahead of me. Irritated, I honked my horn, but he seemed oblivious, lost in his own world. Annoyance simmered as I parked behind him, waiting for my turn at the pump. He finished refueling, but instead of leaving, he sat there, texting or doing who knows what on his phone. I tapped on my steering wheel, impatient to get going, but he didn't budge. Frustration building, I stepped out of my car to approach him. "Hey, you done here?" I called out, trying to keep my tone civil. He glanced at me, a smirk playing on his lips, and muttered something under his breath before speeding off, almost knocking over the pump. I shook my head, muttered a few choice words, and got out to fill up. But as I stood there, I noticed him circling back, his car creeping up slowly. My stomach knotted with unease, something wasn't right. He rolled down his window, shouting obscenities, accusing me of honking at him, claiming I had ruined his day. I tried to reason, to defuse the situation, but his rage was escalating. His words turned venomous, threatening, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I hurried to finish, trying to ignore him, but he stepped out of his car, towering over me. Fear gripped me, his anger was palpable, almost tangible. My heart raced as I fumbled to replace the nozzle, desperate to get away. He approached aggressively, his face contorted in fury, and I realized I needed to get back into my car, lock the doors, and drive away. I did just that, hastily jumping into the driver's seat, heart pounding in my chest. As I tried to start the engine, I saw him storming towards my car, his expression twisted with rage. Panic surged through me. I fumbled with the keys, praying the engine would roar to life. But it refused, betraying me at the worst possible moment. He reached my window, pounding on it, his shouts echoing inside the car. I was frozen, trapped, my mind racing with scenarios of what he might do. My hands shook as I reached for my phone to call for help, but in my panic, I dropped it. The seconds stretched into eternity as I pleaded for him to leave me alone, to back off, but he seemed relentless, his threats escalating with each passing moment. I felt powerless, my voice trembling as I begged for someone, anyone, to intervene. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw another car pulling into the station. Relief surged through me. Maybe this newcomer could help. Maybe they'd scare him off. But my relief turned into sheer horror as I recognized the face behind the wheel. It was another person from the road. I was trapped between two aggressors, their animosity directed squarely at me. Panic surged anew, the feeling of being utterly alone in this menacing situation overwhelming me. I didn't know what to do. Fear paralyzed me as I felt the situation spiraling out of control, a helpless witness to my own potential peril. My thoughts raced, trying to find a way out of this nightmare, but nothing seemed to make sense in that moment. Suddenly, a surge of determination cut through my fear. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, the engine roaring to life. In a split-second decision, I veered sharply, narrowly missing the man at my window, and sped out of there, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I didn't look back until I was far away, my heart still pounding, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Tears welled in my eyes as I realized how close I had been to something truly terrifying. I drove to the nearest police station, my hands shaking as I recounted the ordeal to the officers. They assured me they'd look into it, but the fear lingered, the memory of that man's menacing rage etched into my mind. Days passed, but the incident haunted me, a reminder of the darker side of encounters on the road. I couldn't shake the feeling of vulnerability, the raw terror of being at someone else's mercy, trapped and powerless. I was working the late shift at the gas station, tired and longing for the end of my shift. It was quiet. The usual hum of the machines and the occasional car passing by were the only sounds in the otherwise still night. That's when he walked in, stumbling and reeking of alcohol. He was swaying, barely able to keep his balance as he made his way to the counter. I plastered a polite smile, trying to keep my unease at bay. He started mumbling something incoherent, and I could tell he was heavily intoxicated. I asked if he needed help, but he just grumbled, demanding a pack of cigarettes. As I reached for the cigarettes, his demeanor changed. His voice grew louder, angrier. He accused me of judging him, of being disrespectful. I tried to calm him down, but he grew more belligerent, leaning across the counter, invading my personal space. My heart raced as I scanned the area, hoping for someone to come in, but the station remained eerily empty. He was getting aggressive, his words slurred but menacing. He banged his fist on the counter, demanding more and more, his demeanor turning threatening. I tried to reason with him, to pacify him, but it only seemed to incite more fury. His words were filled with venom, his eyes dark and piercing. Fear gnawed at me. I was alone, vulnerable, facing this intoxicated man who was growing more hostile by the second. He stepped closer, towering over me, and panic surged through me like an electric shock. I felt trapped, my thoughts racing for a way out, but I was frozen. I begged him to leave, to calm down, but he was beyond reason. He leaned in closer, his breath reeking of alcohol, and I could feel the tension escalating. The situation felt volatile, on the edge of something dangerous. My mind raced with scenarios of what could happen, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I glanced towards the security camera, praying someone was watching, but the screen was blank. I was on my own, facing this escalating situation with no one to help. I wished I had taken the self-defense classes I'd been considering. I wished I had some sort of protection. He reached across the counter, grabbing at something, and for a split second, my heart stopped. But it was just a bag of chips. Still, the fear lingered, my pulse racing, my hands trembling. I tried to keep my composure, to keep my voice steady as I insisted he needed to leave. But he wouldn't listen, his eyes burning with aggression. He raised his voice, hurling insults, and I felt the panic rising. I looked around, hoping for anything that could aid me, a weapon, a phone that wasn't behind the counter. But there was nothing. I was defenseless, and that realization made the fear surge. He lunged forward suddenly, knocking items off the counter, and I took a step back, heart pounding. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me, a mixture of fear and an overwhelming desire to escape. My mind raced with scenarios. I needed to get him out, to make it to the door, to call for help. But he was blocking the exit, a menacing figure in my path. I could feel the fear rising, choking me. I tried to project strength, to maintain some semblance of control, but inside, I was a jumble of terror and desperation. I wished someone, anyone, would walk in, would intervene, but the night remained silent, almost too silent. The seconds felt like an eternity as I tried to reason, to plead, but it was futile. He wasn't listening, his aggression growing by the second. I was teetering on the edge of something truly terrifying. Suddenly, he grabbed a nearby display, hurling it to the ground, the sound echoing through the station. I flinched, the noise jarring, my heart pounding against my chest. I knew I had to act, to find a way out. In a burst of adrenaline-fueled determination, I made a dash for the door, pushing past him. My heart was racing, my legs moving on pure instinct. I didn't look back until I reached the safety of the outside, the cold air hitting my face like a relief. I sprinted towards the neighboring store, gasping for breath as I called the police. The fear was still there, the encounter vivid in my mind, replaying like a nightmare on a loop. The police arrived, but the man was gone by then. I felt shaken, violated, and the terror lingered long after he had left. It was a chilling reminder of how a seemingly routine night could turn into a nightmare, leaving behind a lingering fear that wouldn't easily fade. I spent the rest of the night with the police, giving my statement, reliving the horror of those tense moments. It was an encounter that had shaken me to the core, leaving behind an unsettling fear that would take time to overcome. It was an ordinary evening, just another shift at the gas station where I worked part-time. The monotony of the night was only broken by the occasional car pulling in for fuel or snacks. The place was quiet, the buzz of fluorescent lights casting an eerie glow across the deserted aisles. She was one of my coworkers, a young woman named Emily, handling the night shift with me. She was friendly, always cracking jokes to pass the time. But that night, something felt off. Around midnight, she excused herself, saying she needed a break. I didn't think much of it. Everyone needs a moment to stretch their legs or grab a breath of fresh air. But minutes turned into an hour, and there was no sign of her. I called out her name, checked the employee lounge, even the restroom, but she was nowhere to be found. Anxiety gnawed at me, a growing sense of unease stirring in my gut. I decided to check the security footage, hoping for some clue. I scanned through the recordings, and that's when I noticed it, an odd, blurry figure emerging from the shadows near the back entrance, right around the time Emily had vanished. My heart raced, a shiver running down my spine. Who was that figure? Was Emily in some sort of trouble? I had to find out. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously stepped outside, the night air chilling me to the bone. The station seemed oddly silent, the usual hum of the machines gone. The darkness felt heavy, pressing in on me as I walked towards the dumpsters at the back. My flashlight beam flickered across the pavement, casting eerie shadows. As I rounded the corner, I caught a glimpse of something, a faint trail of what looked like blood droplets leading into the darkness. Fear gripped me, a knot forming in my stomach. I followed the trail cautiously, the adrenaline coursing through me. Each step felt heavier, the night growing colder, darker. The trail led me to the edge of the forest, a dense expanse of trees stretching out into the night. I hesitated, fear clawing at my chest. What if something terrible had happened to Emily? I pushed forward, the flashlight beam piercing the darkness. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a twig underfoot sent shivers down my spine. I called out her name, hoping for any sign of a response, but the only reply was the haunting echo of my own voice. The forest seemed endless, the silence hauntingly loud. I felt a growing sense of dread, an overwhelming feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then, I saw a faint glimmer in the distance. I picked up my pace, the adrenaline fueling my determination. As I drew closer, I realized it was a small clearing ahead, a clearing that seemed out of place in the dense forest. My heart pounded as I stepped into the clearing, my flashlight beam dancing across the scene. There, lying on the ground, was Emily's jacket, torn and stained. Dread washed over me, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. I scanned the area, my breaths coming in short, panic gasps. And that's when I saw it, a cryptic symbol etched into the tree trunk, illuminated by my flashlight. It was strange, unfamiliar, sending a chill down my spine. Panic surged within me as I realized how lost I was in this unfamiliar, foreboding place. I felt a presence, a sense of being watched, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I heard something, a distant, muffled sound that sent a chill down my spine. It was a faint whisper, almost inaudible, carrying a haunting quality. I strained my ears, trying to make out any words, any hint of where it came from. As I moved deeper into the forest, the whisper grew louder, more distinct. It was Emily's voice, soft, trembling, pleading for help. My heart raced, adrenaline driving me forward, my instinct screaming for me to find her. I followed the sound, stumbling through the thick underbrush, my pulse thundering in my ears. The air grew colder, heavier, a sense of foreboding settling around me like a shroud. And then, silence fell like a heavy curtain. The whispering stopped, and I was plunged into an eerie stillness. I stood there, heart pounding, my breaths coming in panic gasps, trying to make sense of what was happening. I felt a presence behind me, a sensation of someone watching, of someone closing in. I spun around, my flashlight casting wild beams of light, but there was nothing, just the impenetrable darkness of the forest. I called out Emily's name, my voice trembling with fear and urgency. There was no response, just the oppressive silence of the night. I felt a knot form in my stomach, a sinking feeling of dread settling in. Then, a sudden gust of wind blew through the trees, a haunting howl that seemed almost otherworldly. I shivered, feeling as though the very forest was alive, watching, waiting. I turned to retrace my steps, to get out of this chilling forest, to seek help, but everything looked unfamiliar. Panic rose within me as I realized I was disoriented, lost in this eerie expanse of trees. The distant sound of footsteps echoed through the woods, jolting me from my thoughts. Fear coursed through my veins as I realized I wasn't alone, someone, or something, was out there, closing in. I stumbled through the underbrush, branches clawing at my skin, my heart pounding like a drumbeat. Every shadow seemed to shift, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. I heard whispers again, ghostly echoes that seemed to surround me. I couldn't make out the words, but they sent a chill down my spine, a primal fear clawing at me. Then, I saw it, a faint glow in the distance, a dim light that seemed out of place in this darkness. I pushed forward, desperation fueling my steps. As I drew closer, I realized it was the gas station, the comforting glow of the lights cutting through the oppressive darkness. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The gas station seemed deserted, the eerie silence sending shivers down my spine. I called out, but my voice echoed into the empty night, unanswered. I stumbled back into the station, adrenaline still coursing through me, the fear lingering like a haunting memory. I grabbed the phone, dialing emergency services, my hands trembling. When the police arrived, they scoured the area, but there was no sign of Emily. They questioned me, and I recounted everything: the strange figure in the security footage, the ominous symbol in the woods, the haunting whispers. Days passed, and there was no trace of Emily. The police conducted searches, interviewed people, but she had vanished without a trace. I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent lurked in those woods, something sinister that had swallowed Emily whole. The memory of that night haunted me, the fear of the unknown clawing at my thoughts. Emily's disappearance remained a chilling mystery, an unsolved puzzle that left a haunting sense of dread. The gas station stood as a reminder of that eerie night, a place tinged with an unsettling atmosphere that I could never forget. Working the late shift at the gas station wasn't something I enjoyed, but bills needed paying. It was quiet, usually a few customers buying cigarettes or snacks, nothing out of the ordinary. But that night, there was something unsettling in the air, an unspoken tension that made my skin crawl. He walked in around midnight, a tall man with piercing eyes and a demeanor that seemed out of place. There was an intensity about him, an unsettling air that made me instinctively nervous. His gaze lingered too long, and a chill ran down my spine. He approached the counter with an air of confidence, asking for a pack of cigarettes. But his requests took a strange turn, asking peculiar questions that didn't quite make sense. He wanted specific brands, numbers, almost as if there was some hidden code in his inquiries. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to late-night oddities, but there was something about the way he spoke that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. His eyes bore into mine, as if he was searching for something beyond the surface. He lingered, making small talk that felt too forced, too calculated. His words were coated in a strange charm that felt more like a facade than genuine friendliness. I felt a growing sense of unease, a gut feeling that something wasn't right. His requests became increasingly bizarre, asking for items we didn't even sell, insisting on specific combinations of products that made no sense. It was as if he was probing, testing the waters, searching for something that remained hidden to me. I tried to excuse myself, citing the need to attend to other tasks, but he wasn't ready to let me go. He leaned in closer, his eyes intense, his voice low and deliberate. He spoke cryptic words, almost like a riddle, hinting at some unknown puzzle. I felt a shiver run down my spine, a sense of urgency to escape the suffocating atmosphere he brought with him. But every attempt to disengage only seemed to fuel his persistence, his demeanor growing more unsettling by the second. I caught glimpses of something hidden beneath the surface, a darkness lurking behind those piercing eyes. His words took on a sinister edge, each syllable laced with an unnerving intent that sent a chill down my spine. His gaze never wavered, his requests becoming more intrusive, probing into personal details that felt too invasive. It was as if he wanted to unravel me, to peel back the layers until he found what he sought. I tried to signal to my colleague, hoping for a momentary distraction, but they were busy with other customers, unaware of the unsettling exchange transpiring at the counter. The man's eyes never left mine, his words weaving a web of discomfort around me. It felt like a trap, a suffocating sense of being cornered with no escape in sight. Minutes felt like hours, the night stretching on as if time itself had slowed down. The atmosphere in the gas station grew stifling, the air heavy with an unspoken tension. As he finally turned to leave, his parting words sent a shiver down my spine, a cryptic warning that echoed in my mind long after he had gone. The relief of his departure was overshadowed by an unsettling feeling that lingered like a specter. I tried to shake off the encounter, telling myself that it was just a strange customer, nothing more. But the memory of his words, his piercing gaze, haunted my thoughts. The night dragged on, each creak of the door, each sound outside making my heart race. I felt as though I was being watched, a sensation that made my skin crawl. The minutes turned into hours, the clock ticking away the night. My colleague left, leaving me alone in a dimly lit station, a solitary figure in a place that suddenly felt overwhelmingly vast. I tried to focus on my tasks, to distract myself from the unsettling encounter, but every shadow seemed to move, every sound felt like a harbinger of impending doom. Then, as I went to lock the doors for the night, I noticed something chilling, a faint scratch on the glass, a symbol etched into the surface. It was the same symbol the man had traced with his fingers during our exchange. Fear gripped me, a sense of impending danger swirling around me. I locked the doors, triple-checking them, trying to shut out the growing dread that threatened to consume me. I called the police, trying to explain the unsettling encounter, the odd requests, the cryptic warnings. But even as I spoke, a feeling of helplessness settled within me, a gnawing fear that something sinister lurked just beyond my line of sight. The night seemed endless, the shadows morphing into grotesque shapes that played tricks on my mind. Every creak, every rustle outside felt like a malevolent presence closing in. I barricaded myself in the back office, the flickering light of the security monitors offering little comfort. I watched the screens, my heart racing at every shadow that passed by the cameras. Hours passed, and the darkness outside seemed impenetrable. I felt like a cornered animal, trapped in a suffocating silence broken only by the occasional sound that made my blood run cold. Then, a tapping at the window, a chilling sound that shattered the silence of the night. I froze, fear paralyzing me as I dared not move, dared not even breathe. The tapping grew louder, more insistent, a haunting rhythm that sent shivers down my spine. I could hear faint whispers carried by the wind, ghostly echoes that seemed to mock my terror. The police arrived, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they scoured the area. But there was no sign of the man, no trace of his presence except for the eerie symbol etched into the glass. The night finally ended, but the terror remained, the memory of that chilling encounter etched into my mind, a reminder of the inexplicable fear that had gripped me. Days turned into weeks, and the incident faded into the past, but the gas station held an atmosphere tinged with an unsettling energy that I could never shake off. Working at the gas station always had its quirks, but nothing prepared me for the night when she walked in. She was a regular, this woman, but something felt off. Maybe it was her nervous glances, or the way she darted her eyes around the store, like she was expecting trouble. She'd come in almost every other night, always the same routine, a pack of cigarettes, a coffee, and then she'd linger, hovering around the aisles. But this time, there was an urgency in her movements, an unease that seeped into the air. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to a bad day, but as she lingered near the magazine rack, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't here for the usual reasons. Her behavior was erratic, her eyes avoiding contact, as if she was hiding something. As I tried to focus on my tasks, I caught glimpses of her in the security mirror, pacing the aisles, her eyes flitting around like she was being followed. I wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, but her tension was palpable, infecting the otherwise mundane night. The more she lingered, the more uncomfortable I became. It felt like there was an unspoken secret hovering between us, a tension that simmered just below the surface. She seemed to be waiting for something or someone. When she finally approached the counter, her hands trembled as she reached for her usual pack of cigarettes. Her words came out rushed, as if she was afraid to linger too long, afraid of being overheard. She spoke in fragments, vague sentences that hinted at something beyond my comprehension. Her words were cryptic, almost like she was trying to convey a message without explicitly saying it. I tried to engage her in conversation, to ease the palpable tension that hung heavy in the air, but she evaded my attempts, her eyes scanning the store as if she was expecting danger to leap out from the shadows. There was a moment when she glanced at the security monitor, her eyes widening in fear before she hastily averted her gaze. It was as if she'd seen something that sent a shiver down her spine, something that made her fear for her safety. I wanted to offer help, to ease her obvious distress, but there was an unspoken barrier between us, a line she was unwilling to cross. She paid quickly, practically throwing the money on the counter, and hurried out into the night. As she left, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye, that her presence in the gas station was a mask for something darker, something that lurked just beneath the surface. I glanced at the security monitor, watching her retreating figure on the screen, and that's when I saw it, a figure in the shadows, a man lurking at the edge of the parking lot, watching her intently. My blood ran cold as I realized he had been there the whole time, that she wasn't paranoid, she was being watched. The man's features were obscured, but his presence felt menacing, like a predator stalking its prey. I wanted to rush out, to warn her, to do something, but fear rooted me to the spot. What if the man had seen me noticing him? What if confronting him only made things worse? I called the police, my voice trembling as I tried to explain the situation. They assured me they'd send someone, but as I watched the figure disappear into the night, I knew time was running out. Minutes stretched like hours, each passing second filled with an overwhelming sense of helplessness. The police arrived, but by then, the woman had vanished into the night, leaving behind an unsettling trail of fear and unanswered questions. Days passed, and she never returned to the gas station. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened, that the man in the shadows wasn't just a figment of her imagination. I tried to push the incident to the back of my mind, to go about my routine as usual, but her absence cast a long shadow over the gas station. The nights were eerily quiet, haunted by the memory of her fear-stricken eyes. And then, weeks later, a news report, a missing person case, a woman fitting her description. The chilling realization set in that her suspicions were more than mere paranoia, that she had been in danger, and I had been a silent witness to her plight. I pulled into a gas station, the kind you see off the highway, lonely, dimly lit, and far from any sign of life. I got out, stretching my legs, feeling the weight of the long journey in my bones. The gas station buzzed with a low hum of electricity, casting long shadows across the concrete. As I filled up my tank, I noticed him standing there at the edge of the station's halo of light. A man, mid-30s maybe, his figure silhouetted against the dimly lit backdrop. He gave off this uneasy vibe, the kind that sends a shiver down your spine for no apparent reason. I tried to brush it off as paranoia, telling myself it was just the late hour playing tricks on me. But there was something about the way he lingered in the shadows, something about his stillness that made my skin crawl. I returned the nozzle to its holster, trying to avoid eye contact as I headed toward the store. But as I glanced back, his eyes locked onto mine, a chilling intensity that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. I hurried inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The cashier barely spared me a glance, lost in his own world, as I pretended to browse the aisles, stealing glances at the man outside. He was pacing now, restless energy emanating from his figure. I tried to reason with myself, maybe he was just waiting for someone, maybe I was overreacting. But as I grabbed a few snacks and made my way to the counter, a sense of dread lingered in my gut. The cashier's eyes met mine, and I could see the same unease mirrored in them. We exchanged a silent understanding, both of us acutely aware of the man outside. As I paid for my items, I stole a glance out of the store window. He was closer now, too close for comfort. The man's eyes bore into mine, a predatory intensity that made my blood run cold. I rushed out, my heart pounding in my chest, barely registering the doorbell's chime. I didn't dare look back, but I could sense him behind me, an unwelcome presence at my heels. I fumbled with my car keys, trying to keep my movement steady despite the fear clawing at my throat. My car door clicked open, and I practically dove inside, locking the doors in one swift motion. The engine roared to life as I slammed my foot on the pedal, the tires screeching as I peeled out of the gas station. My heart raced, adrenaline pumping through my veins. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror, my blood turned to ice. He was there, standing at the edge of the gas station, watching me with those piercing eyes. I drove faster, the road blurring into a haze of streetlights and darkness. Panic clawed at my chest, a sinking feeling that he was still there, lingering in the shadows, following me. I pulled over at the nearest motel, heart still hammering against my rib cage. I checked into a room, feeling the weight of exhaustion and fear settle in my bones. But sleep was out of the question. Every creak of the motel floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, made my skin crawl. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that he was out there, waiting, lurking in the shadows. I called the police, my voice trembling as I recounted the encounter. They assured me they'd send someone to check it out, but their words offered little comfort. The night dragged on, minutes feeling like hours. I barricaded the door, the fear of him finding me making me hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. When dawn finally broke, relief washed over me. I packed my things in a hurry, eager to put as much distance between me and that gas station as possible. But even as I hit the road again, the memory lingered, the feeling of dread, the sense of being hunted. It haunted me, a constant reminder that sometimes the real horror isn't in the obvious monsters, but in the human darkness that lurks in the shadows. The gas station faded in my rearview mirror, but the image of that man, his unsettling presence, remained etched in my mind. It was a night like any other at the gas station. I was doing my usual shift, stacking shelves and trying to pass the time. That's when I saw them rolling in, a gang of bikers. Now, I've seen my fair share of customers, but these folks gave me chills right away. There was something about the way they moved, a kind of synchronized menace that made my stomach twist. I tried to keep my head down, hoping they'd just pump gas and leave. But then she walked in, their leader, I guessed. She was tall, tattoos covering her arms, and had this piercing stare that could cut through steel. Her eyes scanned the store like she was sizing up the place, and when they locked onto mine, a shiver ran down my spine. I focused on rearranging the snacks, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. The rest of the gang wandered the aisles, loud and rough, making me feel like an intruder in my own workplace. As I wiped the counter, I could feel her approaching. She had an air of authority about her, the kind that made you want to shrink into the shadows. She leaned on the counter, her gaze fixed on me. Her voice was low, but it carried a weight that made my blood run cold. She started making demands, saying things that made my heart race. The way she spoke, the authority in her tone, it felt like a command. I tried to keep calm, to comply, but the whole situation had me on edge. I did my best to keep up with her requests, trying not to let the fear show. But then things took a turn. She started getting aggressive, slamming her hand on the counter, demanding things I couldn't provide. Her gang loomed in the background, their presence suffocating. I felt trapped, cornered by this force of nature. Every instinct told me to comply, to do whatever it took to get them out of there. But her demands were escalating, becoming unreasonable and threatening. I tried to defuse the situation, to reason with her, but it was like talking to a brick wall. She wasn't having any of it, and her gang's silence only added to the tension. I could feel the fear gripping me, a primal fear that made my hands tremble. I didn't know what they were capable of, and the thought of crossing them sent a chill down my spine. The minutes felt like hours, each passing moment adding to the suffocating atmosphere. I tried to maintain a facade of calm, but inside, I was terrified. Finally, they left, their loud engines fading into the distance. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, my hands trembling as I tried to process what had just happened. I locked up the store, heart racing, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and the thought of facing something like that again made me sick to my stomach. I called the police, my voice shaky as I recounted the events. They said they'd look into it, but the reassurance did little to ease my nerves. As I drove home, the night replayed in my mind like a horror movie. The way she looked at me, the feeling of being at their mercy, it was a nightmare come true. I couldn't shake off the fear, the lingering dread that I had just danced with danger and barely made it out in one piece. That night stayed with me, a constant reminder of how easily things could take a sinister turn. It was a usual night at the gas station, nothing out of the ordinary. I was tidying up the counter when I noticed something odd on the floor. There, scattered around, were some old photographs. I picked them up and squinted at them, trying to make out the details. They were snapshots of a woman, smiling, at least that's what it looked like at first glance. But the more I looked, the more I realized something was off about those pictures. There was a sense of unease that crept in as I studied them. The woman's smile seemed forced, almost strained. Her eyes had this haunting emptiness, like she was hiding something dark behind that smile. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but those pictures sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't just leave them lying around, so I tucked them behind the counter, thinking the owner might want to check if someone had dropped them. As the night wore on, I couldn't shake off the feeling those pictures left behind. It was like a cloud hanging over the place, making the silence of the late hours even more eerie. And then she walked in, a woman in her mid-30s, wearing a long coat that seemed a bit too heavy for the season. Her eyes darted around the store, and when they met mine, I felt a jolt of unease. It was her, the woman from the pictures. My skin prickled as she approached the counter, a forced smile on her lips that mirrored the ones in the photographs. She bought a few things, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off about her. It wasn't just the pictures, it was the way she moved, her demeanor, like she was hiding something beneath that calm facade. She left, but something made me go and check behind the counter. The pictures were gone, vanished as if they were never there. My heart raced. Had she taken them back? But why? What was so important about those pictures? I tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on my work. But then I noticed something outside. Her car was still parked, right under the flickering streetlight. She was just sitting there, staring straight ahead, not moving an inch. It was unsettling, to say the least. What was she waiting for? I tried to ignore the feeling of dread creeping in, tried to convince myself that it was all just a coincidence. But my gut told me otherwise. There was something deeply unsettling about those pictures and her behavior. I kept stealing glances at her car, trying to make sense of the situation. But the night wore on, and she didn't move. I tried to distract myself with other tasks, but the unease lingered, like a shadow haunting every corner of the store. Suddenly, the lights flickered. It was a brief flicker, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. I glanced outside, and she was gone. The car, the woman vanished into the night. I felt a knot in my stomach, a sense of foreboding that something was very wrong. The atmosphere seemed thicker, the air heavier, as if something was about to happen. I wanted to call the cops, but what would I say? A woman bought something and then sat in her car? It sounded absurd, even to me. Then, a noise. A faint, scraping sound from outside, like nails on a chalkboard. My heart raced as I realized it was coming from the back of the gas station. I grabbed a flashlight and hesitantly made my way outside, my pulse pounding in my ears. I shone the light towards the back, and that's when I saw her. She was standing there, in the shadows, staring right at me. Her eyes, hollow and cold, made my blood run cold. I wanted to run, to scream for help, but I was frozen in place. She slowly raised a finger to her lips, gesturing for silence, and then disappeared into the darkness. I sprinted back inside, heart pounding, hands trembling. I locked the doors, but the feeling of dread lingered, a heavy weight on my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every sound had me on edge. What was she planning? What did those pictures mean? The next morning, I checked the area where I saw her, and there it was, a piece of torn photograph. It was her, but this time, her smile was twisted, almost maniacal, as if she was reveling in some sinister secret. I went to the police, showed them the torn photo, and told them everything. They promised to look into it, but their assurances did little to calm my frayed nerves. I kept replaying the events in my head, wondering what she wanted, what she was hiding. That sense of unease, that feeling of being watched, it stayed with me long after that night. Sometimes, it's not the things you can see that are the scariest. It's the unknown, the unanswered questions that haunt you the most. That woman in those pictures, they left a mark on me, a strange fear that never quite went away. I remember the night like it was yesterday, the night when it all felt like it slipped off the edge of normal. I was on the late shift at the gas station, just trying to get through the night. It was quiet, a regular night with the buzz of the fluorescent lights and the occasional hum of a car pulling up for gas. Then he walked in, a man in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, with a scowl etched deep on his face. His eyes were wild, restless, and something about the way he carried himself sent a chill down my spine. At first, there was nothing out of the ordinary. He grabbed a few items, paid without so much as a glance, and left. But then he came back, agitated, complaining about the gas pump not working right. I apologized, offered to help, but it was like nothing I said could calm him down. He started shouting, demanding a refund, and his voice echoed through the empty store. I could feel the tension rise, and it wasn't just him. It was like the air itself was thick with something uncomfortable. He got angrier by the minute, his words turning sharper, more personal. The look in his eyes, it wasn't just anger. It was like he wanted to intimidate, to strike fear. My heart raced, and I tried to keep calm, but I could feel fear crawling up my spine. Then, he started to get closer. I stepped back, my hands searching for something, anything that could be used if things took a bad turn. But he kept advancing, like a predator closing in on its prey. His voice was venomous, every word cutting deeper, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to reason with him, but there was no reaching him. It was like talking to a wall. I hit the panic button behind the counter, hoping for some form of rescue, but it felt like an eternity waiting for help. His threats grew darker, words that sent shivers down my spine, making my skin crawl. It wasn't just about the refund anymore. It was about something darker, something far more personal. The store felt like a cage, and I was trapped with this unpredictable stranger. The minutes felt like hours as I stood there, feeling the rising terror like a storm brewing inside me. My mind raced through scenarios, thoughts of how to protect myself, how to survive this nightmare. The store was silent except for his menacing words, and every nerve in my body screamed for escape. Finally, I heard the sirens in the distance, relief flooding through me like a wave. But even with the police on their way, his eyes remained fixed on me, a chilling intensity that felt like it would never fade. The wait for help felt like an eternity, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was teetering on the edge of something truly horrifying. When the police arrived, he backed away, the storm in his eyes fading into something eerily composed. They led him away, but his eyes never left me, and even as he disappeared into the night, that look lingered, etched into my memory. That night changed something in me. It was a glimpse into the darker corners of human nature, a confrontation with a fear that felt all too real. I still work at the gas station, but that night hangs over me like a shadow. It's a reminder that sometimes, the scariest things aren't the ones you can see coming. The gas station was quiet that night, just the low hum of the refrigerators and the occasional car passing by. I was alone at the counter, organizing the shelves when I noticed a man, a regular customer named Greg. He was browsing the aisles, nothing seemed off. But then, while he was at the counter, paying for gas, I caught a glimpse of something high on the small monitor that displayed the surveillance footage. I leaned closer, squinting at the screen. Craig was looking directly at the camera, his eyes fixated, and there was this strange smirk on his face. He was doing something with his phone, scrolling through it as if looking for something specific. The way he was acting, it made my skin crawl. It was like he knew the camera was there, like he was performing for it. I clicked through the footage, and my heart sank. There were more instances, not just today. He seemed to deliberately position himself in front of the camera, staring into it with that same unsettling expression. I felt a knot form in my stomach, a mix of confusion and fear. What was he up to? Was he trying to send a message? Or was he trying to intimidate? The more I watched, the more my anxiety grew. Some of the footage showed him lingering near the aisles, watching other customers, but his gaze kept drifting back to the cameras. It was like he had a sick fascination with being watched. The feeling of being observed, like I was part of his game, sent chills down my spine. I knew I had to do something, to confront him, but I was terrified. What if he turned aggressive? What if he denied everything and I was overreacting? But those thoughts were drowned by the feeling that something was very wrong. I couldn't just ignore it. I mustered up the courage to approach him, trying to sound casual, asking if everything was all right with the gas pump. His smile was too wide, too forced. He didn't say much, just muttered something about the pump being slow, and then he left. But as he did, he looked straight at the cameras again, that unsettling smirk lingering on his face. I went back to the footage, trying to figure out what he might have been doing. I saw him taking pictures of the shelves, the aisles, the customers. It was as if he was documenting something, but what? My hands were shaking, and I knew I had to tell someone, to report it. But as I picked up the phone, ready to dial, I heard a sound from outside. A car door slamming shut. I glanced out the window and saw Greg's car parked just outside, his figure lingering in the shadows. My heart raced, and I froze. He was watching, waiting. I could feel the hairs on my neck stand up. I put the phone down, afraid that if I called the cops, it would escalate things. What if he retaliated? What if he came back? I was torn, trapped between a growing sense of danger and the fear of making it worse. But deep down, I knew this was wrong. I couldn't let this slide, not when there was something so deeply unsettling about it. I had to act. I stepped outside, trying to appear nonchalant, but my heart pounded in my chest. Craig was leaning against his car, his eyes meeting mine with a chilling intensity. There was a silence, heavy and menacing. I tried to speak, to confront him about the footage, but before I could, he laughed, a hollow, unsettling laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "I like watching," he said, his voice laced with a sinister tone that made my blood run cold. "You're always being watched, you know?" I felt a surge of panic, a raw fear coursing through me. I stumbled back into the store, locking the door behind me, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the phone again. This time, I called the police, not caring about the consequences. I had to protect myself. I had to make sure he couldn't do whatever he was planning. As I waited for the police to arrive, every minute felt like an eternity. I watched Craig through the window, pacing outside, a twisted smile on his face. He knew I had called the cops, and it seemed to amuse him. It was a game to him, a sick, twisted game where I was the helpless pawn. When the police arrived, Craig was gone. They took my statement, promised to investigate, but as I watched them leave, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. What was he planning? What did he want? And more importantly, was he coming back? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every shadow felt like a threat. I kept checking the locks, peering out the window, half expecting to see Craig lurking in the darkness. It felt like I was being watched, like his eyes were still on me, even though he wasn't there. The days that followed were a blur of anxiety. I tried to carry on, to resume my routine, but every time a car pulled up or someone lingered too long, I felt a surge of panic. The police said they were investigating, but there was no sign of Craig. It was like he vanished into thin air, leaving behind a chilling sense of foreboding. I quit that job soon after. The feeling of being watched, the fear of him coming back, it was too much. But even now, months later, I can't shake that eerie feeling. The idea that someone could be watching, documenting your every move, it's a terror that lingers, an invisible threat that never truly goes away. It was late, well past midnight, and I needed to refuel. I pulled into the gas station, a small, rundown place on the outskirts of town. The station was eerily quiet, and I noticed just one car parked at the pump. A man was standing there, hunched over his vehicle, which seemed like it had been in a wreck. I hesitated for a moment, but I needed gas, so I parked a few pumps away from him. As I got out of my car, I saw the man staggering, blood trickling down his forehead. He looked disoriented, like he was lost in his own world. His eyes met mine, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I asked if he was okay, but he just mumbled something incoherent and turned away. I grabbed the pump, trying to keep an eye on him as I fueled up. Something felt off about the situation. There were no other cars around, no sign of anyone else at the station. The man was pacing now, muttering to himself, and his movements were erratic, like he was fighting against something. I finished fueling and went inside to pay. The cashier, an older woman, looked worried. She told me that the man had shown up a few minutes ago, his car smashed up like it had been in a wreck. But here was the strangest part, there wasn't a scratch on him. No injuries, no sign of trauma, nothing. I paid quickly, feeling uneasy. As I walked out, I glanced at the man again. He was staring at his car, an odd grin on his face. And then, to my horror, he began hitting his head against the car door over and over again, without flinching, without any signs of pain. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. It was like he was trying to hurt himself, testing his limits. It didn't make sense. I wanted to help, but I was scared. Scared of what might happen if I got involved. I hurried back to my car, trying to ignore the pounding in my chest. That's when I heard the screams. They were coming from the man at the pump. His screams were piercing, filled with agony. I turned around, and I wish I hadn't. The man was convulsing, his body contorting in ways that were impossible. It was like he was possessed by something. His limbs twisted unnaturally, and his face, it was contorted in agony, but there was something else, something dark in his eyes. I was frozen in terror, watching this horror unfold. It was like his body was fighting against some unseen force. The screams echoed in the stillness of the night, a nightmarish symphony of pain. And then, abruptly, it stopped. The man collapsed, lying motionless on the ground, his eyes wide open, staring into nothingness. I was petrified, unsure of what to do. My mind screamed to get help, to call someone, but my body wouldn't move. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking uncontrollably. But before I could dial, the man twitched. His body jerked, and then he slowly got up, that same eerie grin on his face. There was blood all over him, but he looked calm. I locked the car doors, my heart pounding in my ears. He started walking towards me, his gait slow, deliberate. I felt sheer terror grip me, the kind that makes you forget how to breathe. I started the car, ready to drive away, but as I looked up, he was right at my window, staring in with those empty eyes. I hit the gas pedal, the tires screeching as I sped away from the gas station. I didn't look back, my hands shaking as I drove, desperate to get away from whatever had just happened. The image of his contorted body and that haunting stare haunted me, replaying over and over in my mind. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my home. I locked every door and window, my mind racing with questions. What was that? What had I just witnessed? Was it some sort of drug-induced psychosis, or something far more sinister? That night, sleep evaded me. The image of that man haunted my dreams, his contorted body and that eerie smile etched in my mind. It felt like a waking nightmare, one that I couldn't shake off. I never heard about it on the news, never found out what had happened at that gas station. It was like it never occurred, but I knew what I saw was real. It felt like a brush with something beyond comprehension, something that lurked in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. It was a regular night at the gas station, nothing out of the ordinary. I was behind the counter, quietly sorting out the inventory and occasionally glancing out at the empty forecourt. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow on the aisles. That's when he walked in, a tall, lanky man, with a disheveled appearance that set off alarm bells in my mind. He seemed jittery, his eyes darting around as if he was constantly on edge. He approached the counter, fumbling with a pack of cigarettes before finally setting it down. As I rang up the purchase, he leaned in, closer than I was comfortable with. His breath smelled of stale alcohol, and there was a manic intensity in his eyes that made my skin crawl. Then, out of nowhere, he began talking, rambling, really. He confessed to things, terrible things, things that made my blood run cold. His words were disjointed, but he spoke of violent thoughts and strange obsessions. I tried to keep my composure, nodding along to his unnerving monologue, hoping he'd leave soon. But he didn't. Instead, he started fixating on me, his eyes drilling into mine, He asked personal questions, things that made me shiver. It felt like he was peeling away layers of my privacy with each word. I felt trapped, a prey in the sights of a predator. I kept glancing at the clock, hoping for some reprieve. Minutes felt like hours as I tried to maintain my calm exterior. The man's presence was suffocating, and his unsettling confessions hung heavy in the air. I wanted him out, far away from me in the station. I suggested he leave, making up some excuse about closing time. But that only seemed to agitate him more. His demeanor shifted, his eyes darkened, and his words turned menacing. He leaned closer, whispering threats that sent shivers down my spine. I felt a surge of panic rising within me, a primal fear clawing at my insides. I reached for the panic button under the counter, my fingers fumbling in haste. But before I could press it, he lunged forward, his hand grasping at the counter, inches from my trembling fingers. I let out a stifled scream, my heart pounding in terror. His face contorted into a malicious grin, relishing the fear he had instilled in me. I stumbled backward, knocking over a few items in my attempt to get away. The man's laughter echoed through the empty station, sending chills down my spine. I grabbed the phone, ready to call for help, but he lunged over the counter, grabbing at my wrist, his grip vice-like. "Stay right here, sweetheart," he sneered, his face inches from mine. His breath was hot on my skin, his words dripping with malice. I struggled, trying to break free from his grasp, but it felt like his hold was unbreakable. In a desperate attempt, I managed to wrench myself free, darting towards the door. I didn't look back, my heart racing as I sprinted into the night. The chilling laughter of that man echoed behind me, a haunting reminder of the terror I had just faced. I didn't stop running until I reached a neighboring store, frantically explaining what had happened. The police were called, and they searched the area, but the man was long gone. They took my statement, but I could see the skepticism in their eyes. It felt like no one fully understood the sheer terror I had experienced. I couldn't shake off that encounter, the fear still lingering in my bones. It was a nightmare that felt too real, too suffocating. The thought that he might come back haunted me, leaving me restless and scared. I had finished a late shift at work and was just looking forward to getting home. You know, the usual routine after a long day. The gas gauge on my car was almost kissing the E, so I pulled into the gas station on the edge of town. It was one of those quiet nights where the station was eerily empty, just me and the flickering lights casting long shadows. I pulled up to the pump, hoping to get in and out quickly. That's when I saw her, a woman standing in the middle of the entrance, her back to me, her presence a bizarre roadblock. I honked my horn, but she didn't budge. I rolled down my window and asked if she needed any help. No response. She just stood there, unmoving, almost like she was lost in a trance. It was unsettling, to say the least. I got out of the car, cautiously approaching her. As I got closer, I noticed something odd. She was muttering something under her breath, in a language I couldn't recognize. She seemed distressed, disoriented. I tried to speak to her again, asking if she needed assistance or a ride somewhere, but she remained unresponsive. I was about to step closer when she suddenly turned, her eyes locking onto mine with this haunting intensity. There was something off about her gaze, this unnerving emptiness that sent a chill down my spine. It felt like she was staring right through me, like she wasn't really seeing me but something far beyond. I took a step back, feeling this unsettling sense of dread creeping over me. That's when she spoke, her voice hoarse and strained. She muttered something about not being able to stop it and then abruptly fell silent again, her eyes fixated on mine. I didn't know what to do. It was like she was in her own world, detached from reality. I glanced around, hoping someone else would come by, but the gas station remained deserted, silent except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights. My instinct told me to get back in the car, to drive away, but there was this nagging concern. I couldn't just leave her standing there like that. I grabbed my phone from the car and dialed the emergency services. As I was on the line with the dispatcher, trying to explain the situation, the woman suddenly turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. I stayed on the line until the police arrived, trying to describe what had happened, but there was very little to say other than a strange encounter with a disoriented woman. They searched the area, but she was nowhere to be found. I finished refueling, feeling this knot of unease in my stomach, this lingering sense of being watched. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that this wasn't just a random encounter. I glanced around, half expecting her to reappear, but the gas station remained empty, the night quiet and still. I got back in my car, feeling this overwhelming urge to just drive away, to get as far as I could from that unsettling moment. As I pulled out of the station, something caught my eye, a figure standing at the edge of the road, barely illuminated by the distant streetlights. It was her, the same woman, just standing there, watching my car drive off with those haunting, vacant eyes. The whole ride home, I couldn't shake that feeling of dread. It was like she had left a mark on that night, this chilling encounter that left me unsettled and questioning what I had witnessed. I couldn't help but wonder who she was, what was happening to her, and if I would ever encounter her again in such a strange and unsettling circumstance. As I finished up my shift at the gas station, the night stretched out in an eerie quiet. The flickering neon lights outside cast an unsettling glow, but it was part of the usual routine: close up, lock the doors, and head home. I was wiping down the counter when a man walked in. He was tall, shadowed by the darkness, and I immediately sensed something off about him. His eyes darted around, unsettlingly quick. "Sorry, we're closing," I said, keeping my voice steady. But he just stood there, silent. His gaze lingered on me a little too long, making my skin crawl. I could feel a knot forming in my stomach. Finally, he spoke, his voice too low, too hoarse. He asked for directions, something about a road that didn't exist. I stuttered, telling him I didn't know it. He didn't leave, though. He just stared, that intense gaze fixated on me. I forced a smile and pointed to the clock, saying we were closed. But he ignored it, taking a step closer. My heart raced. I could feel the panic rising within me. His presence was suffocating. He leaned in, too close for comfort, and I caught a whiff of something foul. I fumbled for the phone, pretending to dial the police, hoping it would scare him off. He didn't move, just stood there, watching me, a chilling grin on his face. Every second felt like an eternity. My hands trembled, and I could barely manage to keep the phone steady. "Listen, I'm closing," I insisted, my voice quivering. But he remained, his eyes piercing through me. There was no reasoning with him. I felt sheer terror bubbling inside me. Then, he reached into his pocket, and I tensed, fearing the worst. But he just pulled out a crumpled bill, slid it across the counter, and left without a word. I stood there, shaken, watching him disappear into the night. As soon as he was out of sight, I bolted the door shut, my heart still pounding. I checked the locks twice, ensuring they were secure. With trembling hands, I counted the cash, finding the bill he'd left behind. It was wrinkled, stained, and almost felt like a twisted trophy. After that, I called the police, giving them every detail I could remember. The night dragged on, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered. I was haunted by his piercing eyes, that chilling grin etched in my memory. Long after the police left, I sat there, wide awake, haunted by what could have happened. Every creak outside made my heart leap. It was a night etched in fear, a night I wouldn't forget. Closing up that gas station would never be the same again.